Hi, this is Steve from Office 365 Mon and Azure ServiceMon. And today we're going to take a quick look at some of the performance metric reporting and alerting that you get in Azure ServiceMon. And the goal here today is to compare what you get and how you do it in Azure ServiceMon versus what you may be able to get from Azure directly, because that's a question we get a lot. There are some metric options and alerting available in Azure itself. So how does that compare to what we do in Azure ServiceMon? So the key difference really is all in the management and amount of work that's required to control and set up and configure the different alerting and metric features in Azure itself. And so the way we'll compare and contrast this is we'll start first in Azure and we'll take a look at kind of how you go through there and set up alerts and see alert data, metric data, performance data in there. And then we'll come back over here to Azure ServiceMon and see what it looks like there. So I have here the portal for Azure. If I go ahead and I click over here on Monitor, then we'll have the different monitoring features that are built into Azure. We'll go ahead and we'll click here on Metrics for our performance data. And so you see we've already gone in here and a couple, 3 mouse clicks, and now we have to go in here and we select our subscription. And then we're going to go in here and we can select a specific resource group. In this case, say we want to look at our websites. Then we'll go down here and we'll select our resource group that has our websites. And then in our resource type, we'll go in here to another drop down and we'll select the resource type that we want to look at. And then finally, we can go down here and we pick the individual resource in there that we want to look at. So in this case, we're going to look at our, say, Office 365 Mon web app. Now, once we've gone through all of that, now we can actually look at some of the data for that particular resource, get some reporting information on it, and see what that looks like. Now, if I'd wanted to set an alert on that particular resource, then I can go in here now and I can click Add Metric Alert. And then I'm going to have to come in here. I'm going to have to give it a name. So I'll say, Office 365 Mon. And we'll call it, CPU alert. And then we have the alert on metrics. We come down here. It has our subscription, our resource group, our resource filled in. But you can see there's all of these different resources, and these are just websites. So you're going to have to go through for every single resource that you have. You're going to have to go through the same process, get the right resource group, and then within each resource group, come down and get the resource that you want to monitor. And then within that, pick the metric that you want to monitor. In this case, we'll say CPU time. And now we can say when CPU time is, greater than whatever, 30 seconds, then come down here and then we can say notify via, and we can add our email addresses or a webhook or whatever. But as you can see, you have to do all of that work for every single resource that you have. And then every time you add a new resource, you're going to have to come back in here and you're going to have to do that all over again. So that process of creating these alerts and getting the reporting data on these alerts is really a fair amount of work with what you get out of the box inside of Azure itself. Now we'll compare that over here with Azure ServiceMon. For Azure ServiceMon, we take really a completely different approach. So we'll go in here and we'll say configure performance metric monitoring. And the way we have it set up in here is when you go in to set up your metric monitoring, so these are for your alerts, then you'll go in here and we just look at it by resource type as a whole. So for example, I had like 9 different websites. And in the previous example, when I was in the Azure portal, I'd have to go through that process that I showed, pick each one of those 9 websites, and then for each one of one of those websites, I'd have to create a different alert for each one of these different metrics that I want to get alerted on. With Azure ServiceMon, you just say, hey, I want to create an alert for websites, and you do that just by checking that box, and then you just type in the values here that you want to use to monitor for websites. And then once you've done that, you click the update button, and then that's it. And so now we've set up alerting for all of those different metrics for all of those different websites that we have. If we add new websites, those are automatically pulled in and will automatically do performance metric monitoring for them as well. And so you can see here we have different metrics that you can monitor based on the resource type. So things like the total database size or the failed connections or deadlocks for SQL. For virtual machines, we can look at things like the network I/O, the CPU time, the disk I/O. For storage accounts, things like the capacity. For event hubs, the messages that are incoming and outgoing. For the search service, things like the number of throttled queries and the number of queries that we're actually serving out, the search latency. And then for service bus, different measures related to the number of messages coming in and out, the user errors, connections open and close, active connections, etc. But you can see that the process of actually configuring the performance metrics is significantly easier and faster than you get in the Azure portal itself. Then from a reporting standpoint, we can come over here into the reports and we have a few different views of that performance metric data. So we can look at like recent metric alerts, and that's going to show us the data over the last anywhere from 1 to 24 hours of time. And we can see what these different measures are going to be like. But as you can see, you get a default view right out of the box based on the time of day, the day, and the different resource types. And you can see we have different resource types listed up here by website, SQL databases, virtual machines, etc. If we want to change this view, then we can go in here and we can just add those other things that we want to see. So we can look at the average response time or the average memory working set or the CPU time. In addition to that, we render this like a pivot table. So we can add in here, let's say we want to add the location, and then let's say we also want to look if we have multiple resource groups doing that. We'll drag our resource name down to the bottom there, and then we'll click apply. And you can see, so then we can look at data just by a particular location. We can look at it by a particular resource group, or then within that resource group, we can drill down and see the individual resources within that. And again, this is just websites. You can do the same for your SQL databases, your virtual machines, all of those other things that we just looked at. So that's really the goal here, is to show you the difference in how much easier and faster and more useful it is to use the performance metric alerts and monitoring with Azure ServiceMon versus what comes out of the box with Microsoft Azure and the Azure portal. Thanks. I hope you find this useful.